When I first met Sophia, I wasn't looking for love. I was barely holding myself together, working long hours at a dull accounting firm, living in a tiny studio apartment, just trying to keep my head above water. I figured love was something for other people, not for someone like me. But Sophia, she changed everything. She was bright, full of fire and life. She had this laugh, loud, unapologetic, that could turn heads in a crowded room. She wore leather jackets and scuffed boots, painted her own art on old canvases she found in thrift stores, and lived in a part of town my mother would have clutched her pearls over. Sophia didn't fit the mold my family expected. She didn't come from the right background. She wasn't from the right neighborhood. She didn't have a respectable career, at least not by their standards. But she made me feel alive in a way no one else ever had. We fell fast, the kind of love that burns too brightly to be safe. When I first brought her home to meet my family, I was nervous, but naive enough to hope they'd see what I saw, that they'd fall in love with her, too. They didn't. Dinner was a disaster. My father barely spoke to her. My mother smiled thinly, asking pointed questions about Sophia's future plans and stability. My older brother, Mark, openly sneered when she mentioned her art gallery dreams. On the car ride home, Sophia squeezed my hand and said, "It's okay. They'll come around." I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But deep down, a knot had already started tightening in my stomach. The next few weeks were a blur of strained conversations with my parents. Comments like, "She's not one of us. You deserve someone who can lift you up, not drag you down. Think about your future, not your feelings." At first, I defended Sophia fiercely. I fought. I argued. But the walls were closing in, and the pressure was suffocating. Family loyalty ran deep. And now, the people who raised me, the people who shaped every part of who I was, were telling me I had to choose them or her. And every day that passed, the choice became less abstract, more real, more urgent. I stood at a crossroads, heart torn in two, realizing, no matter what I chose, someone I loved would be heartbroken. And so would I. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was small things. Family dinners where Sophia's name was conspicuously absent from every conversation. Wedding invitations arriving addressed only to me. My mother making casual comments like, "When you meet the right girl, you'll understand why we're being so cautious." Right girl? Sophia was the right girl for me. But it didn't matter. To them, love wasn't enough if it didn't come packaged in the form they expected. Polished, pedigreed, predictable. I tried to keep both worlds separate. I spent weekday evenings with Sophia, laughing over cheap takeout, dancing barefoot in her cluttered apartment, making plans to backpack through Europe someday. With her, life felt wild and full of color, like stepping into a painting where every brushstroke mattered. Then on weekends, I visited my family, slipping back into the clean, quiet, suffocating mold of the perfect son, smiling, nodding, pretending, but the divide grew harder to ignore. Sophia noticed before I could hide it. One night, she sat me down in her living room, the one she'd covered with fairy lights and secondhand velvet cushions. She looked at me, not with anger, but with a sadness that gutted me. "You're pulling away," she said simply. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words caught. She wasn't wrong. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just trying to survive the pressure crushing me from both sides. "I'm just tired," I said lamely. She nodded, but her eyes said she didn't believe me. Or maybe she just knew it was bigger than tiredness. It was fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of losing my family. Fear of disappointing everyone, including myself. A few days later, my mother invited me to Sunday lunch. I almost said no. Almost. But guilt won. As I sat at the long dining table, the silverware clinking too loudly in the sterile, perfect kitchen, my parents made their intentions crystal clear. My father cleared his throat, pushing his plate aside. "We need to be honest with you," he said, voice grave. My mother nodded, folding her hands tightly. "We've worked hard to build a life for this family," she said. "We made sacrifices. We had standards. We can't watch you throw it away over a girl who doesn't belong. Those words, doesn't belong, hit me like a slap. They didn't care how kind Sophia was, how deeply she loved, how fiercely she believed in me. All they saw was difference. All they saw was risk. If you stay with her, my father said bluntly, don't expect us to support your choices. Don't expect us to be part of that life. An ultimatum, cold, final. I drove home that night in a fog. I could barely see the road. Every mile closer to Sophia's apartment made my heart pound harder. When I finally walked through her door, she looked up from the couch, hopeful, waiting, and I realized I couldn't hide this from her anymore. Sophia deserved the truth. She deserved to know what she was up against. We both did. So I sat down beside her, my hands trembling, and whispered, "My parents. They're making me choose." She went still, frozen. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the old heater. Then she smiled, a small sad smile, and said, "I knew it would come to this." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away, just slightly. Not because she didn't love me, but because she understood what I hadn't wanted to face. Some battles leave scars no matter who wins. And now, standing at the edge of an impossible choice, I was about to lose either the woman who made my heart come alive, or the family who built the foundation of who I was. And worst of all, I didn't know if I was strong enough to make the right choice. The days that followed felt like walking through a battlefield littered with invisible landmines. Every word, every look between Sophia and me was heavier, weighed down by the ultimatum hanging over us. We didn't fight, not exactly. We just unraveled slowly. There were moments when I almost convinced myself it would all be okay. When Sophia would curl against me on the couch and we'd talk about silly things, like what we'd name a future dog, or how we'd someday find a tiny cottage with a crooked porch. For a few minutes, I could pretend the world outside didn't exist. That love was enough. But reality has a way of clawing its way back in. Every time my phone buzzed with a text from my mother, I stiffened. Every time my father sent a "just thinking of you" message, I felt the invisible strings tugging harder. They weren't saying it outright anymore, but the threat was there in every silence, every omission. Choose her and you lose us. One night, it finally cracked open. We were supposed to meet Sophia's friends at a bar. She was getting ready in the bathroom, singing off-key to some pop song, her voice bouncing off the tiles. And I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. A new message from my mother. "If you still care about your family, please think carefully about who you're building your future with." I felt sick. I knew what Sophia wanted. She wanted me to fight for her, to stand up, to say, "You're my family now." She deserved that. But part of me, the part raised on family dinners, Sunday services, traditions built over generations, still whispered, "Blood first. Always blood first." Sophia came out of the bathroom, radiant in a simple black dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She caught the look on my face immediately. "What is it?" she asked, voice cautious. I should have told her everything right then. I should have stood up. I should have said, "You're worth it." Instead, I hesitated. And in that hesitation, something in her face changed. The light dimmed. "You're still trying to decide," she said quietly. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I'm just trying to figure out how to make everyone happy," I said, hating how weak it sounded. Sophia's smile was heartbreaking. "You can't," she whispered. "You can't make everyone happy. You can only choose whose happiness you're willing to fight for." She picked up her purse slowly. "I won't make you choose," she said. "But I won't stay somewhere I'm not chosen either." And then she left. Not dramatically, not slamming the door, just left. I sat there, staring at the door she had just walked through, feeling like the world had tilted sideways. I thought back to every choice I had made so far. The compromises, the silences, the cowardice. Trying to please everyone had pleased no one, least of all the woman I loved. And now, for the first time, I was facing the consequence of my own inaction. I might have already lost her. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying Sophia's words over and over. You can't make everyone happy. You can only choose whose happiness you're willing to fight for. At 3 in the morning, I sat on the kitchen floor, my back against the fridge, feeling the cold seep into my bones. How had I gotten here? How had the boy who once promised himself he'd build a life on love and freedom become a man shackled by guilt and fear? I couldn't escape the truth anymore. If I didn't make a choice, the choice would make itself. And I would lose everything that had ever mattered to me. By noon the next day, I found myself pulling up in front of my parents' house, the one with the white fence and the meticulously trimmed hedges, the house where I had spent every birthday, every Christmas, every major moment of my life. My heart hammered as I walked up the front steps. My mother opened the door, already smiling, already assuming I had come to my senses. "Daniel," she said warmly, pulling me into a hug. "We knew you'd understand eventually. Family first, right?" I stepped inside, but I didn't sit. Couldn't. If I sat, I might never stand again. My father was in the living room reading the newspaper. He glanced up and nodded approvingly, like I was a soldier finally returning from the front lines. They thought they had won. And maybe for a long time they had. But not today. "I need to talk to you both," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. They exchanged a glance. The kind of glance that said, finally, he's ready to listen. I took a deep breath. "I love you," I began. "You gave me a good life. You raised me with values, taught me about loyalty and hard work. I will always be grateful for that." My mother smiled, reaching for my hand, pulled it away gently. "But," I continued, "love doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't come with ultimatums." Their smiles froze. "I love Sophia," I said, the words ringing out like a bell. "She is kind and brave and brilliant. She challenges me to be better. She makes me want a life that's real, not just respectable." My father's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake." My mother's voice trembled. "Daniel, please think about what you're throwing away. Your future. Your reputation." "I have thought about it," I said. "Every day, every night. And I've realized something." I looked at them, really looked at them. The people who had loved me their way. The people who had given me everything but the freedom to truly be myself. "You raised me to be strong," I said. "Now you have to live with the man you raised." My father stood up, anger flashing across his face. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back." Pain stabbed through me, but for once I didn't flinch. "I'm not walking away from family," I said softly. "I'm walking toward the family I choose." I turned and walked out the door.
No dramatic slamming.
No shouting match. Just the quiet, heavy sound of finality. When I reached my car, I sat there for a long moment, shaking. Tears blurred my vision. I wasn't just grieving Sophia. I was grieving the boy I used to be. The boy desperate for approval, desperate for belonging. But even through the grief, I felt something else blooming inside me. Freedom. The kind of freedom that costs everything but gives you yourself in return. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers. Sophia's name stared back at me. I hesitated only for a second, then hit call. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said cautiously. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I chose you," I said. "I choose you. Every time." There was a long, shaky breath on the other end of the line. And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, she laughed. A small, broken, beautiful laugh. "I was hoping you would," she whispered. "I'm on my way to you," I said. "If you'll still have me." "I'll always have you," she replied. And for the first time in months, the world felt right again. Not perfect, not easy, but right. Because love, real love, was never about pleasing everyone else. It was about finding the courage to be who you are, even when it costs you everything you thought you needed. I drove through the city like a man waking up from a long, restless sleep. Every stoplight, every turn, every mile felt like shedding an old skin. By the time I pulled up outside Sophia's apartment, the weight I'd carried for months, the guilt, the shame, the impossible choice, had lifted, leaving only the sharp, aching certainty of what mattered. I barely made it up the stairs before she opened the door, as if she had been waiting the whole time. She looked at me, really looked, and in her eyes I saw it, the flicker of hope she hadn't dared to hold on to. Neither of us said anything at first. There were no grand speeches, no cinematic declarations. Just two people standing there, the air between them crackling with everything they'd survived. Finally, I stepped forward and took her hands. "I'm sorry it took me so long," I whispered. "You're here now," she said simply, squeezing my fingers. And somehow that was enough. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. How could they be? Love, real love, isn't a magic spell that erases hurt or fear. It's messy. It's work. It's choosing each other over and over, even when the world tries to tear you apart. There were nights when I woke up sweating from dreams of my mother's disappointed face. There were days when guilt gnawed at me, quiet, persistent. But then there were mornings like this one, sitting on Sophia's battered old couch, drinking terrible instant coffee, planning a tiny, chaotic future that belonged to no one but us. We started building a life that looked nothing like the one my parents had imagined. A tiny apartment filled with mismatched furniture and cheap art prints. Weekend markets and midnight painting sessions and dreams about opening a little gallery someday. It wasn't polished. It wasn't proper. But it was ours. Months later, Sophia and I stood under a string of fairy lights in the park where we had our first real date, saying vows no one else heard. No big wedding. No guests in designer suits. No approval from people who believed love had to come with conditions. Just her. And me. And the promise that we would never again let anyone else define what happiness looked like. As she slipped the simple silver ring onto my finger, I thought about everything I had lost, and everything I had gained. A love worth fighting for. A future we would create together, messy and beautiful and real. As we walked hand in hand back through the darkened park, she leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "You chose me." I smiled into the night. "No," I said. "I chose us." And for the first time, I wasn't torn between two worlds anymore. I had found home. Not in a house or a name or a legacy, but in a person, in love, in a life I had fought like hell to call my own. And it was worth every scar.